You are listening to Wrestling Podium Radio.
You're listening to Voice of Podium podcast brought to you by Wrestling Podium Radio. We're here with 2021 bronze medalist and two-time Canadian Wrestling Trials champion. Is it 2 times?
Kind of. It got really confusing with like the years that I won and like how it lined up with like the pandemic and everything.
Right.
Because like technically we had like a world team trials for 2021 as well.
Mm-hmm.
It just happened that like one of the people in my weight class like tested positive for COVID, so they couldn't come. And then somebody else had an injury, so they had to like withdraw. So like technically I think I've won nationals 4 times, but like one of the years was like 2016 where like the Olympians weren't there. And then 2021, like because we were coming back from COVID. So the 2 like real times were last year and this year, I think. Last year, unfortunately, I didn't wrestle my best at the World Championships. So my coach and I are sitting down and we're really coming up with a plan of how I can best prepare in terms of what tournaments to go to that would be the best preparatory tournaments and get experience to countries that we don't necessarily see a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
We get a lot of exposure, obviously, like we're right next to the US, so we wrestle Americans all the time. I feel like we get a fair amount of exposure with Pan Ams with the South American countries. And then a lot of the tournaments have been in Europe, so we do get more exposure to that style.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like the Asian countries, we don't always get exposure to that.
Right.
So I think, for example, like the third ranking tournament being in Kyrgyzstan, I think is like really crucial for my preparation
You're going.
because yeah, I think a lot of the Asian countries will be there and getting more exposure to China, Japan. I think that's really important because they're 2 of the best women's wrestling countries in the world. So
Yeah.
being exposed to that style more means that you're better prepared when it comes to the World Championships if you have a matchup with them. So
Okay, so speaking of rankings, let's say start with your recent international achievement at the Ranking Series tournament in Zagreb. I actually watched all your matches.
oh, thank you.
Yeah, I noticed you pinned 3 opponents into the semifinal, right? You pinned everyone before the finals. Even when I was watching the World Championships 2021 that you got bronze in that tournament, I think you pinned 2 opponents there too. Tell us about these pinning situations. Is this something that you really like to do? I mean, or it can't be accidental, right? So you're really mastering it.
I guess never thought of myself as someone who is a pinner. But I think the more I've played into my aggressive style of wrestling, I think I'm always coming forward. I'm always trying to close the distance. We have this saying all the time, me and my training partner, space is the enemy. So you want to like apply pressure and crowd your opponent, and that really causes them to make mistakes. And that's where you can optimize on that. And I think really like the best example of that was in my first round matchup in Croatia against Dom. When I wrestled her at Pan Ams, I did a really good job in the first round, and the second round I kind of lost composure and I let her kind of push me around and bully me, and I was backing up the whole time. So one of the adjustments that I made was to always just keep applying pressure and come forward and meet her like head on instead of like backing up. And I think that was what really allowed me to, as soon as she shot in, I had caught her off balance and was able to put her to her back just because I wasn't allowing for any space between us. Like she was coming forward, I was meeting her pressure. And then when she dropped down, I was able to optimize on the body position that we ended up in. So
okay,
I think I'm trying to do that more. Yeah. I've never wrestled the wrestler from India. So I think a lot of the first round was kind of like feeling out where she was with the hand fighting, trying to gauge the distance. She was also very defensive. I find she was latching onto me, but she wasn't taking any attacks. So she was trying to slow down my wrestling, where I feel like the way our styles matched up, Dom and I have wrestled before at Pan Am's last year. So I think that I was able to kind of feel her out a little better because we had wrestled before. So I kind of knew that like my single leg would be there. I knew like how she likes to hand fight and what style. So the wrestler from India, because we had never wrestled, the first part of the match was kind of feeling her out and feeling that she was somebody that likes to like suck you in, and realizing that like you can't take, like I can't take my outside sweep singles when somebody's like holding on to me that close. There needs to be movement. So I had to break those ties in order to set up my attacks. I mean, Fujinami is an amazing wrestler. She won Worlds the year that I won bronze, and she was actually on the other side of the bracket from me. But I think what she does really well is she's always in great body position. And I had never wrestled her before Croatia.
That was your first time, right?
Yeah, that was my first time wrestling her. And I think that there were some adjustments that I should have made in the middle of the match that I kind of made too late. I had kind of stuck with a left leg lead and she was just dropping on my leg, and I wasn't quick enough to be able to react to that in time. Whereas like when I switched to a right leg lead and she shot in, I was able to defend that attack. So there were just some like body positioning things where I was also trying to open her up, but she was in good body position the whole time. And she was just optimizing on me opening myself up to try to get her to open up. So I think that's where I feel like more exposure to that style of wrestling will be really beneficial, because I know that's definitely the Chinese style of wrestling too. They're always in good body position, and you really have to look for those angles and take them out of position to be able to create even just one opening in the match. So it's always a challenge wrestling someone who has a great stance and never breaks it. And I think that's one of the things that Fujinami does really well. And I think that her length is definitely to her advantage as well. She was able to optimize on drop singles and ankle picks because she does have that longer reach. I would say I'm about like average height, but there are still a fair number of girls that are shorter and have like shorter limbs in the weight class still. Whereas I think Fujinami has more of a reach. So I think people aren't used to that style of people being able to just drop down on your ankles and be there. So it's definitely some adjustments that I'll have to make in practice, but I'm looking forward to wrestling her again.
You are listening to Wrestling Podium Radio.
Yeah, it's a bit of both. Definitely before major events, like before like qualification tournaments, like for the World Championships, we definitely do a bit of scouting. Like it's good to know what people's styles are and kind of see like what's their go-to offense. If they're down, how do they like what's their go-to move to score? If they have a lead, what's their reaction going to be? So it is kind of good to analyze those things, but at the same time, I think like in previous years, I had gotten really wrapped up in what other people were doing, and I would overanalyze the matches. Like, oh, she's really good at this. She does this really well. Like this person does this person does this. And I wasn't focusing on myself. So now I try to focus more on what I want to do. So my coach watches the matches for me, and if there's anything that really sticks out as like this person is really good at this, but at the same time, it's more so we phrase it as like, oh, this person has like a heavy right leg lead. Like this is the best attack that will work on this opponent. Or like she reaches with this arm, like that would be a great time to collect your 2-on-1. So it is more framed in a this is how it ties into your offense and how you can optimize on that, rather than focusing on, oh, they're really good at this, so be afraid of this, worry about this. Oh, they have a really good move. It's more focused on what I do and how I can optimize on their style, their stance, their movement.
How did it turn out for you to become a world medalist in 2021, what was the deepest feeling or thought when you won your first senior world title?
I mean, I was definitely really excited. Um, the weird thing was, I feel like I was more excited for what the medal meant to like the community that I'm from than it meant for just myself, which I didn't know I would feel because you chase that so much that you're like, I'm going to feel amazing. Like, I'm going to be so like happy and excited that I got this thing. Um, but I was less so like excited for myself as I was excited to like bring the medal back and show people from New Brunswick that you can live and train in a tiny province like New Brunswick and still be successful at the highest level and like be on the podium at a world championships. Like that meant more to me than winning it for myself. It was more about showing people where I'm from that they can do this too, and showing kids that you don't have to leave New Brunswick in order to be successful in this sport. You can like stay here and live and train and still be the best. So that was really like the biggest thing that I took away from it, I think. I didn't know that I would feel that way, definitely. I was like, I'm going to be so excited. But I actually was more excited when I came home and I got to show like the kids at my club and like kids at the province would like ask to see my medal. Like I was more excited to share it with them than I was to just have it for myself. So I guess it was actually really crazy how everything happened. And I think that being able to like rebound, I guess, from the pandemic, from just missing out on Olympic qualifications. Like I had recovered from COVID and tried to like get back into competition again. Like I had been through so much, and being able to like rebound and perform on the world stage like that after everything that I had been through was like crazy to me that I was able to do that. And I was like super proud of how I was able to persevere and push through all of the adversity that I went through and still be successful at the end of the day. Um, like I always believed that I was one of the best in the world, but I feel like I finally got the opportunity to like show everyone. And I feel like I've been counted out a lot. A lot of people like underestimated me. So I was able to kind of show people that like this is the caliber of wrestling that I'm able to do. And this was like my first opportunity to compete at the Senior World Championships. And I showed that, you know, I am among one of the best. So I was really proud of that.
So you defeated multiple high-level opponents to make yourself female athlete of the year in 2021. How did you make it so efficient that year?
Definitely in terms of my training. It's hard to say, like with tournaments, you have some great performances, some not great performances. I think I wrestled amazing at the last chance world qualifier. It was just like a last 10 seconds lost composure and like got into a situation that could have been probably avoided. And it was super heartbreaking to have that happen. But I think the rest of the tournament, I wrestled amazing. And considering what I had been through, like having COVID and trying to recover from that, and still having like symptoms of long COVID, even up until like a week before the tournament. And then my coach not being able to come because of pandemic restrictions. There was a lot. And I think that I wrestled well considering everything that I went through. And rebounding from that and just missing out on qualifying for the Olympics was super hard. But I think like my coach always kind of says, like, get back on the horse. And so we went as soon as I got home, I did my like 2 weeks of quarantining that I had to do. And then I immediately went to a training camp that we had set up for some of the Canadian athletes and others in Estonia. And it was like an all women's training camp, super high level. There was a bunch of people who had qualified for the Olympics using it as a prep camp. And I think the first week was definitely really hard because I was training with these people who had done what I was unable to do. And I was scoring on them in practice. And that's just hard mentally to feel like you're up there with the best who have qualified to go to the Olympics, but you aren't. So that was definitely a challenge for me emotionally. The second week, I definitely felt a lot better. I had kind of come to terms with what had happened and kind of processed what I consider, I guess, grief, because it is like you have that loss that you are missing out on something. And then we were able to go to a tournament and training camp in Poland. And then I actually was talking to Vinesh when I was there, and she asked me to come train with her in Budapest leading up to the Olympics. So I went there for like 10 days to train. And I feel like when everyone else, I think, in Canada wasn't necessarily training, I was making all of these training opportunities happen for myself. And I was making sure that I was still able to train with the best in the world, even though I wasn't going to Tokyo.
Right.
And so I kept wrestling throughout all of that. And when it came time to prep for, we had a world team trials, I felt like I was the best prepared that I could possibly be. And I felt like I would have won that regardless. But my competitors all ended up pulling out because they either tested positive or were injured. So I did technically get the spot by default because people injured out. But then I feel like my prep leading into the World Championships was great too. And I think that really showed on the mat. I was able to either pin or tech the majority of my opponents. And really, it wasn't until I came up against the athlete from Moldova in the quarterfinal that I was that was where I had never wrestled her before. And I think that I was very offensive, but she's a counter wrestler. And so I got into some situations where she was able to optimize on the fact that I was so offensive and kind of take over those moves. And I did manage to score a significant amount of points on her, but also on myself, because I put myself in a situation where she was able to optimize on my momentum and kind of take advantage of those situations. So I feel like it was a good match to have because I would rather wrestle a very offensive match and make a couple mistakes like that to know what I need to correct for next time than to spend the whole 6 minutes barely wrestling and lose like a 1-0 or 2-0 match. So I think I did still get a lot of information coming out of that match of what I needed to work on. And then she managed to make it to the final. So I was pulled back into the competition the next day and wrestled my 2 matches to win the bronze medal. So I think I wrestled really well. I wrestled how I wanted to, and I feel like I had a really good preparation leading into that. So
what stopped you from representing Canada in the last 2 Olympics?
ooh, that's a long story. Okay, where do we start? It was different scenarios both times.
Yeah.
So in 2016, one of the athletes had an injury provision. So she had put that in prior to our Olympic trials. And so we had to have a wrestle off at a later date. And so even though I won the Olympic trials, she had to wrestle off with, she technically had to wrestle her way up the ladder, but nobody like really had anything to gain from doing that except the alternate and myself as the trials winner. So we were the only two that ended up going to the wrestle off. And so she had beat the alternate. And then we had to wrestle a best 2 out of 3. And unfortunately, I lost both of those matches. So I was then knocked down to alternate, and she was given the team spot. And so she was the one who went to the Pan American Olympic qualifier.
Who was she?
That was Jill Gelles. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so basically, like, she had won a world medal, a bronze, 2 years prior to our Olympic trials. And then in the technical document, there was something about past world medalists having the ability to put in an injury petition to wrestle off at a later date. So basically, she was exempt from competing at our Olympic trials that December in 2015. And so I, at that point, was third on the ladder. So on the Friday night, I wrestled the pool winner. I beat the pool winner. And then on day 2, I beat the number 2. And then we had the finals, a best 2 out of 3. And I won those 2 matches against the girl who was the number 1 on the ladder. So then I was deemed the trials winner. And then basically they had decided that we would have a wrestle off like a month and a half later. So I basically had to like, I couldn't really take a break. I had to try to like maintain a certain level of training. And I don't know that I did that the most effectively. I tried the best I could, but it's really hard to like peak for two major events back to back. So like she kind of like knew to prepare for the wrestle off, but I had to like peak and have the best performance in December, and then I had to try to peak again in February. And so that was a bit challenging for me. I think I still wrestled well. I did the best I could, I guess, under the circumstances, but unfortunately I lost. So then she was the Canadian team member, and so she went to the Pan American Olympic qualifier, and that's where she qualified the weight class. And that's where the other four girls, actually, two qualified at the World Championships. Unfortunately, the two women who qualified at the World Championships also lost the Olympic trials in December. So they had different team members. I can't remember if it was 50 or I think it was 48 at the time. So 48 was qualified and 63 or 62 was qualified. So yeah, so we're back to the ladder system because in 2019 it was open draw. So there was seating, but there was no ladder. So it was just like everyone was allowed to enter. So we're back to the pool and ladder system for this year, for this December. But this time, if you qualify your weight class at Worlds in the best 2 out of 3 finals, you are up one match. So you do have that advantage where you're up one in the best 2 out of 3 if you qualify the weight class. If you don't qualify the weight class, it's the same. You have to win 2. So the last Olympic cycle, it was top 6 at the Worlds and top 2 at the last chance. So now they've changed it. It just means extra wrestling because now at the World Championships, the 2 people who come 5th have to wrestle off for that Olympic spot. So these are people who have never met up on the bracket because of how they do the like single elimination draw.
Right.
So they haven't met each other in the competition, but they've both lost the bronze medal match, and now they have to wrestle off for who is actually 5th to qualify that last spot. And same with the last chance world qualifier. Now, because it's top 3 this time, the finalists automatically make it, but the 2 bronze medalists will have to wrestle off to determine who would be 3rd. Yeah.
That makes sense. That's not a bad
So
idea.
I like that system. I 100% would have had a rematch with Julia to see which one of us would have been able to go to Tokyo. I would have preferred that. So I like the new system. Let's do it.
You are listening to Wrestling Podium Radio.
So when have you been so ready, both emotionally and physically? Is it now? Was it before? Or has it not come yet?
I feel like it's now. I feel like I'm like coming into it at the right time.
Yeah.
I definitely like last year was a struggle. Like I had a really hard time balancing work and wrestling, and I felt like I was getting really burnt out. I would basically wake up and like start working, then I'd go to morning training, and then I would do more work, and then I'd go to practice, and then I would do more work and have meetings, and then I would like go to bed, and I'd wake it up and try to do it all again. And I basically had like no downtime, no rest, no like time for myself. So I was definitely like burning the candle at both ends. And I feel like now I'm like better at communicating and delegating with my job. And I think like being more realistic with expectations of like what I'm able to accomplish. So I do a better job of kind of communicating with, I'm the executive director of Wrestling New Brunswick.
Oh, cool.
So communicating with the board and the president and kind of like having more realistic expectations of what I'm able to accomplish when I'm preparing for a competition. So I think I did that a lot better. The last tour I was on in Europe with Croatia and Sweden, and then leading into nationals. And now where I have like a little bit of downtime, I have to catch up on work, but I think I'm doing a better job of like managing the two simultaneously.
So if you run into a big name and powerful competitor in your group, how would you feel?
So I usually don't look at the draw until like the morning of the competition.
Mhm.
And then I don't know, it's kind of like I can't change the draw. It's like you have who you have. Um, it is what
Yeah,
it is.
it
It
is
is
what
what it
it
is.
is.
It's definitely, I think it's like exciting because like I want to have those matches. So I definitely like in Croatia, for example, like seeing that I had Dom first match, I was actually really excited. Like it's not often that you get to meet up with the reigning world champion first draw of the day.
Right.
So I was just excited to have a rematch with her in general, just because I wanted to, like, I want to test myself. I want to wrestle the best in the world. So the fact that I was able to wrestle Dom and then later wrestle Fujinami, like, those are two people that have won worlds the last 2 years. Like, those are matches that I want to have. So I was actually excited to see them on my side of the bracket and to know that I had them in the draw because um, as important as a ranking tournament is, it's not the world championships. So like this is like a test, but it's not like the final exam kind of thing. So I want to test myself against them at these tournaments. So it's not a surprise when I come up against them at the world championships in Serbia. So I was excited. So I always get excited. I like wrestling. So
Absolutely. What was the most challenging match of your life? Can you name one?
oh, uh, most challenging match. I think like the hardest matches I have are probably wrestling my fellow Canadians. Women's 53 kilograms in Canada is ultra competitive. I feel like it's one of the weight classes that is stacked. Um, the last 2 years, for example, it's been myself, Diana Weicker, and Carla Godinez, all three of us world medalists on the podium. I
Yeah.
think that it's super competitive, always going up against other world medalists in the finals of your like national championships is super challenging. Like,
Mm.
regardless of who comes out of the weight class, like myself, Diana, and Carla were all at the ranking tournament in Croatia. We were all top five. I was bronze, Carla and Diana were both fifth. So I think in terms of like whoever comes out of the weight class, like Canada is going to be well represented in this weight because it's so competitive. And it has that depth to it. So I
Yeah.
think those are definitely the most challenging matches, like having to go through other world medalists in order to even just get out of the country, I
Right.
think is always really challenging.
Yeah.
And we wrestle each other often enough that you know your styles. That's
Mhm.
what makes it difficult. It's
Okay.
sometimes easier to go up against someone you've never wrestled before
Mhm.
because you don't know each other so well. Is when
Exactly.
you're seasoned competitors and you know each other so well, those are the matches that are really difficult to wrestle. So
That makes sense. Yeah.
it's
And then,
definitely a unique thing in Canada, I think. There are some countries that don't have that depth in every weight class.
right.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of a given that they'll represent their country. Whereas in Canada, we are so competitive and we have so many high level female athletes that you have to beat people who, like, if you look at women's 76, even like Justina D'Estasio is a world champion. Anybody who has to come up against her, like, you have to beat a world champion to qualify that way, like to be in that weight class. Like, that's tough. Like, that's tough to do.
Right.
Like, you look at this, it's the same thing in the US. Like, I'm pretty sure the top five women in 76 kilograms in the US are all world medalists
Mm.
and all like amazing. So when you have to beat other people who are the best in the world just to represent your country in that weight, that's always super challenging. I think what makes Japan such a threat is regardless of who you have, not only are they going to be in good position the whole time, they actually are super offensive as well. So they're the ones who are like pushing the pace. They're going to keep you like on your toes. They're always trying to attack, attack, attack. Like they like ending all of their matches by tech fall.
Mm.
So they're always going to be on you. Whereas like when I've wrestled China in the past, like my match with Peng was low scoring. It was difficult to open her up and create those opportunities, but she was also not attacking, attacking, attacking. She was good with just hand fighting and not taking those attacks. She would take her 2 points when she needed it, but
Right.
she wasn't looking for a 10 point. Like she wasn't looking to get attack. So I think that's what makes Japan so tough is not only are they in good body position the whole time, they're also like relentless in trying to keep getting attacks, keep getting takedowns. They will work like a lot of people consider like parterre as like time to take a rest. Like they don't actually go hard on the bottom, whereas Japan is like if they can finish it on the ground, they're gonna lace you up. They're gonna make something happen to finish the match.
They actually really want to wrestle.
Yeah, yeah. They want to finish it, so they're not playing around. They want to get it done.
Who's your best wrestling friend?
Oh, that's a hard one. I mean, I have a lot of really good friends. Unfortunately, most of them are retired now.
Oh.
Oh, it's so unfortunate. Yeah, like probably my like best friend in wrestling was Natasha Fox. So she was there at Worlds. She wrestled 55 when I won my bronze medal. So that was also probably like what made that experience so much fun is that like I was there with like my best friend and we got to like sit in the
Oh,
sauna together and she warmed up with me and was like cheering me on the whole time. And it's like she was there to like warm up with me before all my matches and like she didn't fly out till like the next day, I think. So it was like just great having her there and like being able to like have people on the team that are like your best friends is like amazing and feels so good. Like also to be able to like train with your best friends is like really fun. Like it's hard for me anyway to be like really good friends with people in my weight class. It's always kind of like the weight class below or the weight class above. So Natasha always kind of like wrestled 50. So like we only wrestled each other like once, like many, many years ago, back when the weight class was 51 kilos and Natasha was wrestling up and I was like wrestling down, I guess. Um, but then like after that we were in different weight classes. So it was like you never have that like direct competition of like having to wrestle each other at a tournament because I find that really hard to like have to go up against someone for like there's only one spot and it's like you or them.
yeah, it's so hard.
So yeah, it's definitely much easier when you're in a different weight class and you can like support each other. Like you be the number one in this weight and I'll be the number one in this weight. Like then it works out.
Who's your best international friend?
Definitely Whitney Condor.
Okay.
So we were competitors back in the day too.
Mhm.
But then yeah, we ended up going different weight classes and like because then it was like we were in different weights, but we were still able to train together and push each other to be better.
Yeah.
And like Whitney's just the kind of person that like would give you the shirt off her back. Like she's just the nicest person and like she's always been super supportive of me. Even when we were competitors, there was never like any hostile feelings. We always like wanted the best for each other.
Yeah.
We always like she always wanted me to be like the best in Canada and I always wanted her to be the best in the US. So like we never had that direct like rivalry, I guess, of like making teams. But we were able to train together and like try to accomplish our goals simultaneously. Especially it was much easier when we changed weight classes because then it was like no direct competition at those events either. It was like we could be warm-up partners because we weren't having to compete later in the day against each other. And just like I go down to the States all the time to train and like Whitney lets me stay at her place. She's just one of my best friends and it's just like awesome to have those people in the sport and yeah,
Oh,
it just feels good to have like people who are like there to support you and like train with you and like it makes really tough training days better because you have like your best friends there.
what sport would you take up if you were not to happen to be a wrestler?
Ooh, that's a hard one. Because I actually tried so many different sports before I found wrestling. Basically, like as long as I can remember, I wanted to go to the Olympics. That was like ever since I was like a little girl. That was like I don't even remember when it started, but my mom's always been like a really huge sports fan. So like we always watch sports in the house and it's not just like major league sports. Like she loves baseball and football and stuff, but like we also watched a lot of amateur sports. Like she loves curling. She loves watching like other stuff like tennis. She likes watching Team Canada in anything. So like we always had sports on, and like I just remember we would always watch the Olympics, like Summer Olympics and Winter Olympics. And I always just kind of like knew like that's what I want to do. Like I want to go to the Olympics. But when I was little, I like didn't know what I was going to go to the Olympics for. So I like tried every single sport that I could. But it wasn't until I found wrestling that I was just kind of like, oh, I really like this. And so I started wrestling in 2003. So that next summer was the first time that women's wrestling was on the Olympic program. And it was then that I was like watching Tanya Verbeek, and I was like, oh my God, like someone from like Canada in the Olympic final, like in the sport that I just joined, like that's amazing. I was like, super inspired, and I was like, I want to do that. So that was like when I decided, I think that like I was gonna go to the Olympics for wrestling. So I mean, I tried so many different sports. I don't know, like I played soccer for a number of years, but I feel like I wouldn't do a team sport. I like the individuality of wrestling. You do need other people to succeed, but I think like the aspect that it's like just you out there on the mat and like you take ownership over everything that you're doing. Like I do so much, like all the weights that I do, like I work with a strength and conditioning coach, but I'm the one who pushes myself in the gym every day. And then that shows up on the mat. I'm not like relying on other people to do a program. I do my program to the best of my ability. And then I show up on the mat and I know that I'm the strongest that I can be when I go out there. Like I have an exercise physiologist who does like all my cardio and stuff. I'm the one who does all those cardio workouts. I'm the one who pushes myself all the time so that when I go out there, I know that I'm in the best like cardiovascular shape I can be. Like it's those pieces that I think like why I love individual sport, because you're not relying on other people to do their job. It's like all on you. So it's like while I have a team of people supporting me, I'm the one who's ultimately like in charge of all that. Like I'm the one who knows whether or not I put in 100%. I'm the one who knows like whether I've pushed myself to be the best that I can be. And that like self-reliance and like dedication, I think is why I love wrestling so much. It's like, I don't know, it's like physical chess. It's like you can prepare like doing weights, doing cardio, like mental performance, like all that stuff, and try to be like the best person on that day. But it's like so like technical and tactical, and like everybody knows the same technique, but it's like who is going to like counter what, who's going to do this, like how are you going to react to this person doing that. Like so much of it is so like turbulent and like in the moment and like based on instinct. And like you can wrestle the same person like 100 times and not have the same match. Like that's what I love about wrestling. It's so dynamic and different. And yes, other sports are like technical and tactical, but like I don't know that I would love any of them the way that I love wrestling. Like even when I'm not competing, I enjoy watching wrestling tournaments. Like I love doing that. Like I don't know that I love any other sport the way that I love wrestling. So I don't know. I don't know what I would do. I jokingly say curling because like Kevin Martin won an Olympic gold medal when he was like 50. So I feel like, after wrestling, I could just do that because it would be easier on your body.
That's a good idea. Why not?
Transition to a winter sport.
What's your signature move in wrestling?
Oh, that has to be my sweep single, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And then
although after the World Championships, yeah, I think a lot of people would say inside leg trip. But I feel like it's the single leg, like sweep single. That's probably like, yeah, my best move.
If you could change something, like anything about your community, your city, the people around you, what would it be?
I mean, I definitely am trying to get more people wrestling in New Brunswick. I think we need to have more people wrestling in Canada in general, especially recovering from the pandemic. I feel like a lot of people retired and then we didn't have the same exposure to the sport that we had in the past, because activities in schools, for example, were kind of restricted and everybody was doing online learning. So I think we didn't have the opportunity to have kids exposed to the sport for a number of years because of all the restrictions. So now we're in a rebuilding phase, and like really it's about trying to get people exposed to wrestling, because it is kind of, I guess, what you would consider a non-traditional sport. And I feel like, not that it's a barrier to entry, but I feel like people feel intimidated by wrestling because there's so much technique that people are afraid to show wrestling in gym class if they don't have any experience with it. And I think that's one of the things that we really have to combat, is being able to like get into the school system again and introduce kids to wrestling, because I don't know that they'll have exposure any other way. Like it's really easy for phys ed teachers, I think, to show basketball, soccer, badminton, like very traditional sports that are kind of low barrier to entry. It's very easy to show people a technique, how to dribble a basketball, how to shoot a hockey puck. Like people generally know how to do that. But for somebody as a phys ed teacher who's never had exposure to wrestling before, to try to teach a double leg or to try to teach a like fireman's throw, like that's going to be very difficult for them.
Mhm.
So I think that a lot of teachers don't feel comfortable in showing that, so they'll shy away from it. So I think as organizations, I know in like my job with New Brunswick Wrestling, we're really trying to combat that and come up with kind of like a wrestling school curriculum to be able to show phys ed teachers, like, here are some easy ways you can show wrestling movements to get people more like body awareness and kind of more comfortable doing the techniques, that it doesn't have to be super complicated. You can show a simplified version of it. And then if kids like it, they can go to a club in the community to be able to pursue the sport further. But I think really like we really need to do a better job of like promoting the sport on all levels. I think there's not a lot of exposure to it. I'd really love to see like participation across all levels, like from school age kids all the way up to like adults. Like I've really also tried to do like introduction to wrestling for adults who have never tried anything like that before. I think adult recreation is sometimes something that's neglected. We focus so much on kids a lot. Like I think we need to focus on that too, but I think there's a lot of areas and room for growth. If you look at, for example, like BJJ, like they have a lot of like adults who are like in their 30s or 40s doing it recreationally, and they have like a lot of members. Whereas like wrestling, I feel like people retire and then they're no longer involved in the sport once they reach a certain age. So being able to keep people involved in the community, even at a recreational level, I think is going to be like really important for us to like keep our numbers up and to keep exposure to the sport. And the more like adults we keep involved, the more like they're going to get their kids involved, and like their kids are going to ask their friends to join, like building more of a community rather than like, because it is an individual sport, but we are a community. You need training partners and a team. So being able to build our numbers in that way, I think would be really great. And I know we're working towards it in New Brunswick. So I think doing that as a whole as Wrestling Canada would be great. So
That would be great. Great.
yeah.
So how do you define success? Your perspective.
I think success is, how do I word this well? Like knowing that you're giving 100%, I think, because you can feel like you've had success and been successful, regardless of the outcome, if you feel like you've given your all and you've performed your best. So I think that like, even for example, like that I only won bronze at the World Championships in 2021, like I still felt like it was a success because I prepared the best that I could. I was physically prepared, mentally prepared, tactically prepared, and I went in and I executed the things that I wanted to. And I feel like I performed in areas that I had set goals for myself to be able to succeed in those areas. And so that's, I think, what determines whether or not you feel like you've been successful. Like the past tour and lead up to nationals, I think was very successful because I was focused, I was intentional with my training, I set goals for myself, and I was able to achieve those goals. And if I didn't achieve the goals, I did reflecting and adjusted, and then was able to like make improvements. So I think all of those things together is what I would probably define as success. No one likes losing.
Right.
But I mean, I don't think that the cliche you win or you learn is wrong. I think that's very true. I think that you can look at your performance and not everything in a loss is bad. Like there are highlights and things that you did well, even when you've been unsuccessful in the outcome. There are things that you did in the process that you were successful in. And I think being able to actually look and reflect on those objectively, not tied into the emotion of the loss, I think is what will make you better. Looking at what you can do to improve the next time. It's like one loss does not make you a bad wrestler. I think that's what a lot of younger athletes don't understand. And I still have difficulty with, because I feel like it's one of those things like everyone wants to go to the Olympics. That's the pinnacle of our sport. And when I lost in the semifinal to the athlete from Romania, I was definitely like, I mean, I compartmentalized it because I still had to come back and wrestle for bronze the next day. So I still had to like after the tournament go to the sauna and like get ready to make weight for the next day and then wrestle in my bronze medal match. But even after the tournament, it was like being able to reflect on everything that happened, the lead up to the event, the preparation, your warm up that day, how you did in your other matches, communicating with your coach, your training partner, like all of those things lead to like a successful performance. So looking at what worked and what didn't work, not just in the match itself, but in the lead up to that match, I think will help prepare you to be a better athlete and a better wrestler at future events. So even when the outcome isn't what you wanted, I think there are still things that you can learn and positives that you can take away from the experience. So like when I got to meet Carol at the like university sport championships, back in like 2008 when she had like just won her medal, like that was amazing to me. Like it's just cool to like meet those people and realize that they're just like down to earth, humble people, and like they're the best athletes in the world, but they're just like genuinely like they care about the sport, they care about the younger athletes, they want to be good role models. So like I guess like seeing that somebody who had just qualified to go to the Olympics and then went on to win an Olympic medal was still coming out to like a university sport championship to like watch us wrestle and like support the team and like watch Canadian wrestling, even though it's considered like a lower level. Like the fact that they're like humble enough and care enough about the sport to do that was super inspiring. And then like it felt more meaningful to like watch her be on the podium in Beijing because I had met her like a couple months prior. Like that was super like inspiring to see that like somebody who is just genuinely a nice person and down to earth and humble, and like watching her succeed on the Olympic stage at the highest level and like be an Olympic champion, like that's just super cool. So I definitely like really admired Carol growing up as well. But I mean, my biggest role model in life is my mom. Like,
Okay, yeah.
I mean, she's a single mom and like she's self-employed, and like watching her, like when I was a young girl, decide that she wanted to change professions and go back to school and then go and get her master's degree, and like watching her like work and then start her own practice, like just watching her succeed at all these things like was super inspiring. And like she's always been very adamant that like if you don't know how to do something, like we learn how to do it and we overcome that, and like you don't just give up.
Yeah.
Like, and that can be like anything in life. Like you just put yourself in a position to like learn and grow and become better and like minimize those deficits. And like I think that I've really taken that approach in like all aspects of my life. If I don't know an answer to something, I go find it. Like I know how to do what I need to do in order to be successful. I don't see that as like a barrier to prevent me from doing something. I try to overcome obstacles and like become better in all areas because of her and that philosophy that she taught me. So my main coach at home is Don Ryan.
Okay.
So he is kind of like my personal coach. Anytime that he can be at an event in my corner is always like the best case scenario. Just because I've been working with him since 2009. So I feel like he knows my style the best. He's the one who's actually really good at doing the video scouting for me, and helps me come up with like the tactical stuff because he's really good at kind of analyzing based on like what my opponent looks like, what my style would work against them, like what the best attack would be and what the best strategy would be for that opponent based on what I'm good at. So we've really done a lot of work on that, being more like, he says, focus on Sammy. So it's kind of like,
I like
focus on me, focus on what I'm good at. And then like there are little adjustments that we make based on like who my opponent is, but it's all still based on like what my best offense is, and what I'm going to be the most successful at executing. So I feel like we work really well together. And anytime he's able to come to the major tournaments, that's always super beneficial for me. Just because we kind of have that like, I hear him in the corner and we have that like, he'll say one word and I'll just know what he means and be able to like execute it. So
yeah.
it's like when you have that good of a relationship with a coach, it's always like you want them to be in your corner at like every event that's possible. So, but I mean, Wrestling Canada has like a number of amazing coaches that I've worked with. Like I've worked with Paul Ragusa, who's like amazing, Dave McKay, Dave Spinney. Actually, we like make a joke that a lot of the like coaches that coach for like Wrestling Canada right now are all called Dave. So we made a couple jokes that like, you know, to coach for Wrestling Canada, you have to be Dave now. So yeah, like at Worlds we had Dave McKay, we had Dave Colley, we had Dave Spinney and Dave Zilberman. So 4 Daves.
Yeah.
So
You're right.
even at the ranking tournament, we had 3 Daves. So everyone asked, "Oh, is Dawn going to be there?" And I'm like, "No, he like can't make that one." And they said, "Who's coaching you then?" I said, "A Dave."
A Dave.
You are listening to Wrestling Podium Radio.
Win or lose, like your friends and family will still love you. I think that was like a big source of anxiety for me when I was younger, was that feeling that like I needed to win. Like it's not about needing to, it's about like wanting to. Like I want to do well. I don't like need it. So like win or lose, at the end of the day, I come home and like I know that like people aren't going to think of me differently. Like who I am as a person is not defined by my results on the wrestling mat. And I think that that's really important. Like I really believe in like having that integrity and being a good person on and off the mat. Like I'm not somebody who will go out there and do anything that it takes to win. Like I believe in being the better wrestler, technically, tactically, whether that's being stronger or faster or better prepared. Like I don't believe that you have to be a bully or try to cheat or try to hurt people. I think there are a lot of people who will do anything to try to succeed. And I think that you don't need to push someone else down to bring yourself up. So, like, really, at the end of the day, like who you are as a person, I think is more important than the results on the wrestling mat. And I think that a lot of younger athletes maybe lose sight of that because they do want to chase that big outcome goal. They want to win, they want to win, they want to win. But I don't think that you should want to win at the expense of all other things. I think being a good sport, I think having integrity, being like honest, being fair. I think all of those things are far more important than the outcome of a wrestling match. So who you become in the process of trying to achieve the outcome is more important than the outcome itself. Because even things like everyone wants to go to the Olympics, but there are very few athletes now. It's only the top 16 in the world per weight class who get to go. That's a very small group of people. So there are far more people who don't make it to the Olympics than do make it. So I think that like having that goal is great, but who you become and the lessons you learn and the values and skills that you gain are far more important than whether or not you achieve the outcome.